Ant-Man and the Wasp: Quantumania has now come out. The newest MCU film is now in theaters. Now, when we were talking last week about what their box office projections were, they were talking about anywhere between $95 million low, and they said could go as high as about 105, but the expectation was around 95, which would have made it the biggest of the Ant-Man franchise so far. Because I believe the first one made in the 50s, the second one made around 74, 75 million. If it hit 95 or a little bit more, it would be the biggest in the box office. Well, it's now official. Ant-Man and the Wasp: Quantumania has made $104 million on its official opening weekend. Now, don't mind this headline, it says 120. That's including the extra holiday that they're forecasting for. But the actual proper opening weekend, the biggest in Ant-Man's history, at $104 million, which exceeds, at least by a little bit, the expectations they had going into the film, which is absolutely great. Now, the question, though, becomes, was that great enough? Because we're talking about at $104 million. And again, reemphasizing, that makes it the biggest in Ant-Man's franchise. But how should we look at that $104 million? Well, if we actually go back and start looking at, okay, let's take the environment into consideration. Let's take the context. What are the comparables? What has been coming out this past year that we can compare it to? And unfortunately, the comparisons don't look all that great when you start holding up Ant-Man and the Wasp compared to other comic book films that have come out this year. Let's go over to the classroom for a second, take a look at this. All right, first up, let's compare it to one of the big other Marvel films that came out recently, Black Panther 2. Well, that opened with $181 million. That's like an 80% more than what Ant-Man and the Wasp: Quantumania did. Now, granted, Black Panther, of course, was Black Panther. Even though this one didn't have its star or its main character, but it still made about 80% more. Okay. What's another film that came out in the last year, a comic book movie film? Again, sticking with the MCU. Well, Thor: Love and Thunder made $144 million. That's, again, about 42-something% more than Ant-Man and the Wasp. And this was not the strongest movie, but still, it's a Thor movie. Everybody loves Thor, so everybody was excited about it. Okay. Well, then, as we keep going back, there was another Marvel film in the last year, and that's Doctor Strange 2. That made $187 million opening weekend. Okay. Well, then we look at the Batman, which, Taylor, you can look up the exact number for me. I'll change it if I have to, but that was somewhere around $140 million. So non-Marvel, first film in its installment, battling against some obstacles of some people were apprehensive about Twilight Boy being the star of it, which I thought was a great casting, but some confusion about Batman, a lot of people not really loving the state of the Batman with the DCU. Do we got a final number on that Batman opening weekend?
So the opening weekend for the Batman was $134 million.
Okay, so 134. I was off by $6 million. So 134 million. So still over 30% more than what the third film of this franchise, supposedly the first really big marquee appearance of the big baddie of phase 5 and 6 and whatever moving forward, Kang the Conqueror, and it still made more. Now, when you really go into it, the only comic book movies of the past year that Ant-Man and the Wasp, with its $104 million opening weekend, compares fairly to, or favorably to, has been Black Adam and Morbius. Black Adam, of course, with its $67 million opening, Morbius with the $39 million. So yeah, if you compare it to Black Adam, that's a favorable thing. Hey, Black Adam had the biggest movie star in the world, and it did considerably better than it. Morbius was, Morbius, and it obviously did considerably better than that. But again, when you compare it to the serious comic book movies that have come out in the last year, whether they're DC or Marvel, Black Panther, Thor: Love and Thunder, Doctor Strange, the Batman, that $104 million suddenly doesn't look all that great. So this really is a story of two perspectives, right? Because on the one perspective, you can say, well, Ant-Man and the Wasp, kicking off phase 5, bringing in Kang, made less than all the other major comic book films in Black Panther, Thor, Doctor Strange, the Batman, of course, better than Black Adam and Morbius. But on the other perspective, hey, listen, studios love seeing franchise do this. And maybe it's not doing this to the MCU as a franchise as a whole, but for within just the Ant-Man movies, it is the best result it ever had by a considerable amount, because I think the last one made like 74.
The first one made 57.
What's that?
The first one opened with 57.
Yeah, the first one 57, the second one 74 or 75. Yep. This one made like $30 million more. So again, it's a story of two different perspectives. Rob, let me ask you, if you're sitting in the high tower over at Marvel right now, which perspective are you focusing on right now? The fact that it, by a considerable amount, is the biggest opening for the Ant-Man franchise, but when compared to the other major comic book films that have come out in the last year, not faring as well. How do you perceive it?
I think it's a great result for this film because, like you said, the franchise, it's more than doubled the money of the first one. And as you look at how a franchise works, that's amazing. Ant-Man has never been a marquee character in the Marvel comic universe. And so these other characters, Black Panther, all the Thor, Batman, Doctor Strange, these are all marquee characters.
Much higher profile characters.
And so that Ant-Man is getting higher, has been his profile. Even in the Marvel Cinematic Universe, outside of his own films, he's a secondary character. He doesn't usually, I mean, he took front and center. He saved the world in Endgame because he was able to get out of the quantum realm and tell the Avengers, yo, we can time travel through the quantum realm. But even then, he wasn't front and center to that. It was the other Avengers.
Really did it.
Yeah, I mean, so what's going on here? And the fact is, the general audience, they don't know who Kang is. This is the first time people are Kang. Why are we? I mean, it's funny because we as pundits and imagination connoisseurs and people that have read comic books their whole lives know who Kang is because he's a big player in the Marvel universe for a long time. But the regular audience doesn't know who he is. So it's not like they're going to go, ooh, we can't wait to see Kang. So the general audience, I think this is a good, and when you look at this, the general audience is, I think, liking this movie more than a lot of us diehards. And the movie did well worldwide as well. So it had an overall pretty great opening, I think, for this movie. They got to be happy with it.
To play devil's advocate, though, like Guardians of the Galaxy, who nobody had heard of, with Ronan the Accuser as your villain, which nobody had ever heard of, it opened to $170 million. But again, you're right. When you look at the last two Ant-Man films, you are seeing this in its box office results. Hey guys, we want to take a second to thank a sponsor of today's video, the Black Tux. It's time we had the talk. You know the one I'm talking about, the one that ends in the three-letter word. I'm talking about a tux. And when you need a tux, the best place to go to get one is the Black Tux. The Black Tux makes it super easy to get an on-trend, top-quality, guaranteed to fit tux without ever needing to leave your house. So here's how it works. Take the Black Tux fit quiz, pick the style you want to wear, and boom, your tux is delivered to your door 10 days before the day you need it. That's plenty of time to try it on and make sure it wears you well. And hey, if the fit's not quite right, say hello to the Black Tux Fit Guarantee. Order a better size within a day or two of receiving the less than great fitting one, and they'll send another one right away at no extra cost. Their expert fit specialists will help you find the perfect style tux or suit and make sure it fits just right. Listen, I've been dubious in the past about online sites or apps that say they can get your measurements, but the fit quiz with the Black Tux works great. And man, I wish I had had these guys for so many events I've attended over the years. So rent or buy, the Black Tux is the best place to go when you need a tuxedo for a wedding or a special night. And right now, when you go to theblacktux.com/Campea and use the code Campea, you'll save $20 off your order. That's TheBlackTux.com/Campea, code Campea to save $20. Anyway, Chris, when you look at this, great for comparing it to other Ant-Man films, not great when comparing it to the other box office films that have come out this year. Which is the perspective you kind of look at it from?
I mean, I'm a glass half full person anyway, so I think that this is good. I think that it's showing upward trajectory. And what really matters here is that this is going to have legs. I mean, despite hearing really, really poor critical review, people are going out to see this. Audiences are enjoying this. And we've seen that a lot lately with critics not really digging a superhero film and the audience is still showing up and having a fun time. And this is why, it's up to you guys. No matter what anyone says, no matter what anyone on this panel says, it's up to you to decide if a movie is good and of your liking, right? And I think that's what we're going to really keep seeing is if people keep going to the theaters to see this, that's where Marvel's going to know it's got some success and obviously making more of its money back.
Let me put it out for Rob. You alluded to it, but let me throw it out to you guys. Mm-hmm. Over or under 55%. What will the second weekend drop off be for Ant-Man and the Wasp Quantumania? Over or under 55% drop? Rob, what do you think?
Over.
Over a 55% drop. Chris, what do you think?
Under.
Under a 55% drop. I'm going to go over, but not by a ton.
Not by a ton, maybe 60.
Yeah, maybe 60, which by the way, 50 to 60% drop second weekend is a reasonable second weekend drop. When you get over 60%, that's when you get a little bit concerned. Under 50% drop, you got to be thrilled. Anywhere between 50 and 60%, I think, is a reasonable percent droppage. So I'm going to go over 55%, but not by too much.
You know, it's interesting to me about this movie because the first two Ant-Man films, especially for the critical establishment, like there's a critic I've been reading for decades named Jeff Wells, and he really liked the first Ant-Man movie.
I love that movie.
He hated this movie. And I think that that's a good indication of critics, because if you're not predisposed to loving comic book films, and he's not, and the fact that he loved the first Ant-Man movie is quite atypical for him. But this movie has got to be, if you're part of the critical establishment that goes to foreign films, that goes to art house movies, you come to this movie, I can only imagine it's like somebody banging on your head because of all the crazy quantumness and the colors. The Ant-Man movie, again, was a heist film. It was set in San Francisco in mostly real locations and a man shrinking down, easy to understand. You get to this movie, I think most critics like, what am I even looking at?
Yeah, but it's not just that, because you and I are both predisposed to this kind of movie, and we were like,
Right, but that means that we're maybe halfway there. But imagine a critic that's not predisposed to loving something like this, and especially somebody that liked the first couple Ant-Man movies because they were superhero movies that were contained and easily understood. And
I don't know that I agree, though, because a guy like Jeff Wells, who's been around this business a long time,
decades,
they know how to recognize a good movie. I mean, it's still a subjective personal opinion, of course, right?
Yeah.
They're no more authoritative than anybody else, but they know how to recognize a good movie through the gobbledygook, as you would say, of whether it's time travel, multi-dimension, a multiple personality, or all types of wackiness. They've seen it before. So,
but you know, at the core, I think like if you showed Pauline Kael this movie, or you showed what they're looking for in cinema is the great truths of mankind. You know, they're looking to see how is the truth of our lives today illuminated by great cinema. Is Ant-Man and the Wasp Quantumania, is it dealing with the big picture? I mean, other than the heroic notions of we have to defeat the evil and survive, this is not Antonioni's Ennui trilogy. You know, I'm not seeing La Notte, La Ventura, or The Eclipse in this. I'm not seeing Ozu movies in here. I'm not seeing Rashomon. I'm seeing not even Amelie, which is one of my favorite movies of all time. You go to Quantumania, man, I can imagine it would be like taking my mother to a Rammstein concert. That's what I would imagine. My mother would be looking at me after 5 minutes going, why the hell did you bring me to this movie?
Du hast.
And she probably would have loved the first Ant-Man.
Yeah, and I think those, I said, like, you're mentioning it's not Amelie. It's not even Captain America Civil War. It's not even the first Black. It's not that. Anyway.
Because, yeah, you can understand that. Any critic's going to watch Civil War and understand it's got Robert Redford. They're harking back to 70s conspiracy thrillers. Like, you know, whether it's All the President's Men or The Parallax View with Warren Beatty, whatever, it's all good. But this...
But see, that's where I'm going to be really curious, because I was going into this movie and we were looking at the trailers, and I said, while I like the trailers, part of me wonders, is all the multiverse, all the quantum realm, all the CGI slobberfest, is that going to appeal as well to the average film goer? And I think the real proof of that is next weekend.
Next weekend.
Because if it stays in that 50 to 55 to 60% drop, we'll say, okay, it did all right. I think if we see a drop more than 60%, we're going to say the audience didn't want to go back and watch multiple times, and they didn't want to bring more people to see it with them.
And the question earlier that you asked about the writers, Waldron and Loveness, they need to make sure that all of this gobbledygook, the timey-wimey, you need to make sure that the audience, and the more characters you bring in, you really need to ground this stuff in some kind of recognizable human experience, because you're going to spin off, even we are not going to be able to keep track of it all. And it's a risk.
All right, guys, question is for you. What do you think about this? Ant-Man and the Wasp, on the one hand, its opening weekend of $104 million does not compare favorably to other big comic book films that have come out in the past year, whether that's a Batman or a Doctor Strange or whatever. However, in terms of its own franchise, it's another significant step forward. First one in the 50s, second one in the 70s, this one 104 million. That's got to be looked at optimistically. How do you approach it and look at it? Whatever you guys think, jump down to the comment section below and let us know your thoughts.